Hi, and welcome to She's the Boss Chats. I'm your host, Jules Brooke, and in the show, I interview amazing women and female founders about what it is that they're doing and why they're doing it. It's all about us lifting up the women around us. Okay, well, I'm very, very excited today because I have my great friend and a woman who I have to say has inspired me for many years, ever since I first met her as the compere of a pitch fest in Melbourne, Dr. Polly McGee. Welcome.
Hey, Jules, it's so great to be here. Thank you for asking me.
Oh, it's my absolute pleasure. I just am such a big fan of yours. So this is the early days in my new She's the Boss podcast, which is really all about you and what a great boss chick you are. So the first thing that I want to ask you is, what exactly do you do? Can you tell us about your business and what you're doing now and why?
It's a great question for the now, in fact, because it's something that I reckon I've struggled with for at least 15 years, of that way to encapsulate what it is you do. So this is going to be a long and unexpected answer, I suspect, to this question.
I like long and unexpected.
Because I've just gone through a rebranding process, and one of the things that I really struggled with was that I'm what's known apparently in the design industry as a slasher, which is
a slashy.
I'm an author.
No, slashy, I think it is, not slasher.
I felt like slasher was even better because I was like going to take a mask or something.
It sounds like something out of what's that one where Leatherface? What is it? It's Texas Chainsaw Massacre. You're the slasher.
Leatherface. Yeah, so Evil Dead style. So being a slashy, and it's interesting because I distinctly remember being coached by a professional consultancy coach to always have 3 or 4 things up your sleeve. So I would say, well, I'm an author and I'm a digital strategist and I'm a 15 other million things. But people would always be like, so what do you do exactly? Because
what really
they'd see me
do?
on stage talking, and they'd see me doing books, and they'd see me doing consultancy, and they'd see me catering for a local Buddhist gig, and they'd see me doing stuff, and like it was super, super confusing, which I took for a long time, because even in all of my careers, which are many and varied, I have to say, I've always done lots of things at once. I'm really curious, and I love to go down the rabbit holes, and if someone asks me to do something, I just say, yeah, I can do that, even if I can't. So I was redoing my website, and I was just like, I don't want to be a slashy. And I also am really sick of this idea that we have to have our identity attached to a doing. And
yeah, true.
Because so much of my work is around sort of a spiritual engagement. Who am I in service to? What is it? What are the gifts that I'm bringing through someone else just by being there and witnessing them? So I came up with this new way of describing myself, and the website's going to launch really soon because we're just finishing off now, which is all-purpose human being.
An all-purpose human being, which is a bit like all-purpose flour, is it?
Which is, well, there's a little cute play on words there because I am known for my love of baking and the all-purposeness, but it's that idea that I'm an all-purpose human who's being. I'm embodied in my humanity. I'm here having this experience, doing whatever I'm doing. And I don't have to go, well, I'm this price point and I'm this association and I'm this identity and I'm this, look how cool I am. It's just that I'm just here. So whatever you want me to be, you can change me, like you can change that dough into any shape, any form. And for whatever you need, I am an all-purpose human being. And I'll remain so. So this is going to be my steady state now. No slashies.
For the rest of it? For the rest of your life. All right, so I don't even know how to ask you a question now that is going to help people understand.
No, I can unpack that for you. So right now, the majority of my work is spent doing leadership training. My business partner, Zoe Coyle, and I run a business called Pilot Light, which we train under Brene Brown's Dare to Lead work. So we've been trained by Brene to do that work.
You're one of very few people in Australia that actually does that, aren't you?
Very few in Australia. There's only 400 in the world that did the training, and I believe that I think close to 100 of those are no longer actually doing the work. So Zoe and I do that, but we also do a range of other leadership and emotional intelligence. And again, we train people how to be human and how to be really beautiful whole beings, and that's super important. So a big chunk of my life before COVID was doing face-to-face facilitation in that mode.
Yeah.
But I also write, and I'm a digital strategist. So what that means is I create content and I help people find their identities and their brands online. a big portion of that work has been working for under actual programs as a content creator. So one of my aliases is Dr. Digital, and Dr. Digital I've been doing for about 10 years, where it started by me just writing content and writing a blog. So someone would write me a question like, Dr. Digital, I just don't understand the Facebook algorithm. And I'd be like, you're not alone, but here's some of the ways you can get your head around. So Dr. Digital is kind of like an agony aunt that then just became an avatar that does a whole lot of digital education work. And then I just write and I poodle around and sort of find interesting rabbit holes to go down that are non-specific.
Well, they are non-specific, but you love startups. I know that. I know you love anything to do with female empowerment and with helping people get ahead and try different things and innovation and technology and all that exciting stuff. And you've been involved in that forever, because my vision of you, I was actually trying to describe you to someone the other day, and I said I have such a clear vision of you because we both were at that pitch fest, and I reckon we were one of 4 women around probably 200 blokes. It had all been set up like the pitch club. Do you remember? So it was like a boxing ring that people had to get up and stand and talk in. And you were comparing it, and you were wearing like a 50s style dress and a pair of Minnie Mouse shoes. I just remember it so well. And how unusual you were in that sea of sort of suits and blokes. It was in a boxing
ring. Like, you couldn't get more of a sausage fest than
it was.
Putting people in a boxing ring. For that matter, or in a Shark Tank. And I think that really speaks to the heart of one of the reasons it's so difficult for women to find their grounded place in the startup sector. But you're right. I mean, I think much as I love rabbit holes, I love startups for the same reason, because it's like you don't know what you're going to get. It's the great mystery of popping down that hole, following
it's the ultimate new shiny thing, isn't it?
It's new and shiny, but also I love to explore finding new ways to satisfy customers. So from that UX perspective, startups are always solving problems, and so what someone's problem is a really great thing to solve. And I mean, you'd know as well from having been in all businesses and particularly in PR, it's like we're telling the stories that are solving the problem so other people can go, I want that too.
Yes,
and so
true.
That's like the capacity to sort of ideate and find new things. It's so interesting. So it's probably less about the shiny in a collectible way and more about the, like, I feel good, I can tick that one off.
I always think of it as just something new and exciting and interesting. And once I sort of touch the outsides of it, if there's anything that I can do to be involved in it or help with it or whatever, that's the rabbit hole that I go down. So talk to me a little bit. So you're doing this Brene Brown Pilot Light, was it?
Pilot Light, yeah.
Right. So why? I want to know how you even thought of Brene Brown, because I had never, and I know I'm probably one of very few women, but I had never heard of her before you mentioned her probably 2 years ago, I think it was, when I was down in Tassie and we were chatting. So can you tell me, why did she resonate with you and why have you set this up in Australia?
So it's another interesting rabbit hole, because I reckon someone told me about Brene and recommended I read one of her books. It would have been 4 years ago. And I was just like, I'll get around to that. And I never jived with it, and I never went down that path. It was just like people kept saying, oh yeah, you should read this. But I had a lot of other books in my bookshelf to read. And then for some reason, one day I was just like, I've got to read that book. You know, it was like my mind just drove me to the book.
What's the name of it? Sorry, what's the title of the book?
The first book that she wrote was called Daring Greatly, and it was about how to be vulnerable. I mean, the leadership pieces come sort of as a circle back for Brene from her early work when she was working in corporate. But her work for the last 20 years has been as a social researcher.
Right.
So she started to try and find out what people could sort of, what things they could find to make themselves able to more reconcile their lives. So she was dealing with lots of trauma, and she was talking to people about being vulnerable, and she found that the people that were the most resilient were the most vulnerable. But in doing so, she uncovered that those people also had the best handle on how to manage shame. And for anyone who's ever even hears the word shame, I know most people I know suddenly just go like snails with salt poured on them. It's just, we don't do shame well. We don't do vulnerability particularly well either. And we certainly hate talking about it. So Brene was like, I don't want to talk about this either. I'm a Texan woman. I don't want to have any of these soft, wet conversations. But I have to find out more about shame to be able to talk about vulnerability. And so went her own rabbit hole, where she ended up doing several years researching shame. And then she came up with a TED Talk on vulnerability, which she tells the story of how she thought maybe 2 people would see it and it wasn't going to be a thing. And so she was really just herself and told what her journey with vulnerability had been. And suddenly it was like 50,000 views, 100,000, 500,000, 5 million. And she was like, holy shit, like this is out of the bag now. And I guess the rest is history for her. So in doing that work, so she's written several books, and all of them, I like to almost read them in sequence, because they take you through a process of understanding self, understanding what it is to start to step into a leadership role, or to step into a role where you are starting to become a little bit immune to the criticism of others. She has very beautiful metaphors she uses, like standing in the arena, and that many of us are in these battles with the bigger world, but when we aren't caring for what the world is saying about us, we're only caring for what service we're giving. It's easier to stand there, get knocked down, stand up. So of course this had a lot of resonance for me as someone who's interested in this exploration of self, but also in startup world, where the hallmark of startups is that you must fail over and over and over again. And we talk about failure in Australia, but we talk about it like the Americans talk about it, because they really actually do failure pretty well. We do failure in an Australian way, which is we only talk about failure when we're a success again, and we can say, oh, I did fail once, it's over there, look at me now. Which is terrible when you actually fail. That? Sorry?
But are there strategies around that? Because I actually, obviously through my PR thing, am saying to people, your struggle to success story is really what people want to read. They all want to hear that there's been a failure and that you've managed to recover from it somehow.
Yeah.
And yet... Yeah. There is that positioning in Australia of, I'm a leader, I know what I'm doing, so therefore I don't want to tell you that I had all these issues in the past, because you might look at me and think I'm no longer an expert.
Yeah, and I'm going to put that in a car park, and I'm going to come back to it, Jules, because I'll finish off on the story of how we got to doing Brene, because otherwise the listeners are just going to be like, I'm getting confused by her rabbit holes now, and she's in another one. So I'd sort of started reading the Brene stuff. It really resonated with me, because at the time I was doing a tech startup and was having my own experience of deep rabbit holes of failure. And Brene sort of sent out a thing saying that she was going to do a training for facilitators. I did a lot of facilitating, just because I speak in front of crowds and often get asked to. And Zoe, who's one of my best friends, she's also a facilitator. She had her own company in Sydney. And we both said, let's both apply. And if we get in, we'll go and train. And if we pass, then we'll come back to Australia and we'll start a company and we'll do this together, because we'd always wanted to work together. And we got in. And, that selection process, I was sort of quite surprised, because it's very vigorous. But there's Brene's looking for certain types of people who can deliver the work with almost a spiritual and religious fidelity, because it's so important to her that it's delivered in a way that empowers people and isn't used in the wrong way. So we did that. We came back and we started, and at the same time as Brene had released a documentary on Netflix called The Call to Courage. So Australians were starting to really adopt her leadership stuff. And the way her leadership program works is it's all about heart-centered leadership and vulnerability. And there's a beautiful quote in Dare to Lead, the book, by Manusha Fig, who's the head of the London School of Business, that's along the lines of something like, the leadership of the past used muscles, the leadership of the now uses intelligence, and the leadership of the future is going to use heart. And that really resonates with me, because I think we're very much seeing what the outcome is of mind being used purely without heart. And we're seeing it in the climate, we're seeing it in inequities in society, we're seeing it in all kinds of ways. And we can't continue to work as though the earth has finite resources and humans are dispensable, which is what we see in a lot of big business and big management. Yep. So the move towards really understanding people, and of course COVID has really opened up this whole world of us seeing what the individual needs to work in a whole sense in their lives. And I think the game's changed. So that's the pilot light story. But the failure piece was super interesting, Jules, because as a startup advisor for years, I'd been always singing that song. We've got to fail, everyone's going to fail, and we have to talk about it, and that's how we get stronger. And when I actually failed, and I remember...
You don't want to tell anyone.
Well, I'd made the decision to close my tech startup while I was in Texas training with Brene. And I was really clear. I think when I got some distance out of Australia, I'd been trying to raise capital for 6 months. I'd had no traction. I'd taken on this company that I had no technical expertise in. So I was very vulnerable in terms of always needing someone else to help me. And the number of times people were like, we'd fund you, but you really need a male founder and you really need some tech expertise and all that. Anyway. So I'd kind of, with the distance, I'd been able to go, okay, this is not for me, and I'm going to sort of shut it all down. I was like, that's okay. I'm going to fail, and I've tried and failed. And I came home and I literally went to bed, put the doona over my head, and I'm like, oh, this jet lag's bad this time. And then like a week later, I'm like, oh, I'm not coming out from here. This is bigger than this. And the whole time I was thinking, I've got to write a blog. I've got to write a piece about this, because this is the problem, that while we're in failure, it's almost impossible to talk about it. The pain is so great, and the sense of not being able to function, and that you've really dropped a ball in a way that's so profound that as soon as I could get pen to paper, I did, but I swear it was another 3 months before I could write that piece that kind of said, this is why we don't talk about failure, because it's so painful and it's so difficult to articulate that it's only really able to be mentioned with some healing and some distance, which is really difficult, because then we make it all dressed up and kind of like it's cool. It's fucking not cool.
It isn't. And you are, I mean, I had that happen to me with the development of my platform, and I froze. You literally go, I actually don't even know what to do other than can I pretend it didn't happen, or can I pretend it's not happening? And then, as you say, with a bit of distance and some time, you can start to talk about it. And of course, we've learned loads of things during that period, but you just... It's the shame. You're so right with shame. And I mean, I don't know very much Brene Brown stuff, but it is the shame, I think. And it's not personal shame in some way. It's just like, it's a shame as well, like it's in itself, it's a shame.
Yeah. And it was kind of the deep irony, of course, given I'd just done all this training on identifying shame and rising strong and being resilient. And there I was, kind of the least strong, least resilient, least rising. But I guess
ignoring it,
that
hiding
was probably
it, doing everything.
Not a bad turnaround, but it was absolutely about shame. And it was the shame, when you unpack it, that not just that I've failed, like intellectually I can deal with that, but on a really deep level, it's the shame of I'm not enough. I wasn't enough to do this. Therefore, I'm probably not even enough in the world. And given how many women both you and I work with, we know that the overarching motif for women in the reason they hold themselves back is that they're told from birth they're not enough. And that's reinforced over and over. And so it was a really kind of interesting bruising lesson of that shame is paralyzing. And it's so much more important than ever to have us be able to recognize when it's happening, know what to do to pull ourselves out of it, and then learn those lessons of resilience. So at the end of the Dare to Lead process, this idea of rising strong is that, Brene says, if you're brave enough for long enough, you're going to fall. And I think knowing that is kind of like, oh, here it is, boom. But how do I get up and dust off and put the arnica on the bruises and go back in the ring without just going, my life's over and I can't ever do that again, and I'll just go back to, something that no one will ever see me. It's like, but I also think in Australia we hang on to the shame a lot longer, and we don't reward people for being really brave and resilient.
Yeah, because to me, and I actually do have that ability, and maybe that's why I'm able to keep going as an entrepreneur, to just kind of go, okay, it happened, move on, and I'll laugh about it, and I'll talk about it probably a year later. I'm very impressed it took you only 3 months. Might take me a year, other than very close friends. But you do get that perspective in the end, and you do kind of move on and try something else. So, Polly, now I want to ask you, because you are such a fascinating woman, and I don't know whether you can cast your mind back, but can you talk to me about basically your career since you left school and how you've ended up where you are now? Because I'm guessing that at 16 or 18 or whatever you were when you finished school, you didn't think, oh, I think I'll go and work for Brene Brown, be a leadership person about vulnerability and shame.
I totally didn't think that. And I think the benefit of hindsight and the looking backwards is that you realize all along the way that things are really connected, and you don't recognize at the time they're connected. And I think particularly when you're young and you're full of all that sort of the remnants of narcissistic sort of ego of youth. You're all just about the moment, and it's the only one thing. So a lot of my career was made just going down rabbit holes. But I had a lot of shame about that, because I felt like I should have known what I wanted to do. And I had a really strong belief that I should have known what I wanted to do, and everyone else knew what they wanted to do. And
Are you talking
I
about
was the only
just as you left school, though? Because I'm really surprised. I mean, I never
my
knew
whole
your
my whole
career.
teen, my whole childhood, it was like, I think I'd read too many books where everyone was like a ballet dancer, or they were an ice skater,
doctor or a lawyer.
They had something where they were just going to be that thing, and I was like, oh, everyone else knows. I felt like I was not in on some giant cosmic secret. So the doing of things wasn't so much about me recognizing I'm just an experiential, curious creature. It was more like I was frantic. I was frantically trying to find who I was. So I did this endless amount of stuff, and it was that sense of that identity of who I was, feeling secure and feeling grounded and settled, was going to come from me assuming an identity of a job. Now, while I've been talking to you, Jules, I've been frantically leafing through my book because...
Now, which
when
book, Polly? Because you've written a couple of good, 2 or more, I don't know how many, but one that I've read, The Dogs of India, and you've got the other one, The Good Hustle. So which book?
Yeah, so I'm looking at my book, The Good Hustle, which sort of was the culmination of me going, okay, what are all the things I've learned as someone who was frantically rummaging through the sort of sale bin of roles to put on to see if any of them fitted me. And when I did that, I wrote a list of the jobs that I'd done. And I'm going to read them to you because, you know, when I say I did a lot of stuff, you might get a sense of the actual diversity I'm talking about.
Okay.
So in case anyone thought I really hadn't explored the amount of jobs I wanted to do, here's a selection I've done, and there's more since I wrote the book. So I was a chef, a hairdresser, a sandwich hand, a commercial shop fitter, a window dresser, a fashion retailer, a call centre agent, a cafe owner, an adult film reviewer, a political lobbyist, a digital strategist, a farmhand, an artist in residence, a radio presenter for the ABC, a public servant, a speechwriter, an innovation grants manager, an IP manager, a not-for-profit co-founder, a copywriter, a web builder, an academic, an author, a yoga teacher, a social media trainer, and a strategic marketing lead. Not exhaustive list.
No, that's amazing. But what's interesting to me is that there are almost themes as you go through it. You can see how that exactly as you said, and I'm sure you're about to now explain it, but that they are all connected. One led to another, that then led to another, that made you think you might do this, and then that happened in your life, and so, which is really, I guess, the message I want to get out to people is you can't really plan for your life. It just happens unless you want to be a doctor or a lawyer or whatever, and that's going to satisfy you for 40 or 50 years.
Yeah, and I know a number of vocational humans. My husband is one. He was born an engineer.
Yeah.
He spent his whole childhood doing electrical engineering around the house on things. He became an electrical engineer. He remains an electrical engineer, and he's deeply happy and absolutely fulfilled and full of purpose.
Yeah.
Another of my friends is a vocational teacher, has been the whole time I've known him. He'll never do anything else because he just loves it. It is who he is.
Yeah.
And so that to me was always very confusing. But as you say, Jules, there's two things that really, I guess, I've grown into now as an adult. I think I'm entering adulthood. I feel it's coming soon anyway. And one is that the things that you feel are just like disjointed disasters. And in my mind, every time I did one of those many things and had a realization that like the veil would be lifted and I'd be like, oh no, this isn't the one, I would feel I'd failed. And I'd feel that yet again, I was unable to get where everyone else had got and my life was in misery. And that's mental torture.
I know you've been beating yourself up for a long time, haven't you?
Yeah, but it really had that sense. And I remember sort of getting to my early 30s and just having a moment of going, I just can't go on. Like this was just, and I was thinking, you know, also in that sense of what deep bullshit it was to be so privileged, so educated, so like not in any kind of crisis, and to be sort of in this kind of, oh no, poor me sort of mode. And I just thought, fucking, this is ridiculous. You're ridiculous. And I kind of remember going, what if you just tried going into work and what you're doing, just enjoying it in the moment and being the best you can be, and seeing if you can be in service to others. Stop reading all those books about yoga and spirituality and actually just do that thing that they tell you to. Surrender to who you are and help someone. And it completely transformed my experience of the workplace in that day. And it was like, oh, this is what they're talking about. And then from there, everything just rolled in the most elegant way. And all the things I'd kind of wanted and needed, boom, someone would ring up and say, oh, I've got this job. Can you come and do it? And it was like, oh, that's going to make me have enough money to do this other thing I wanted to do. And so it went. So it was a really good thing. But what I really understood is that none of us know anything. None of us know. And to think we can plan for anything more than 24 hours in advance, it's kind of nuts. And as is so sadly the reality of what's happened for many people who I would consider, you know, during COVID had brilliant businesses, had put 20 years of work into them, gone overnight.
Yes.
So if we think we've got it under control, it's just delusional. So to be able to just go, how much can I just stay present? And can I just be here for now? Without the labels, without the, I'm doing all this, I'm building this empire, I've got all these influencers and followers. It's like, what about we just get through each day being the best we can? And it's just a really radically different way to look at how you go through the world.
It is, but do you think that you are saying that because you've had so many careers? Because you've learned along the way? Because I do wonder, like, let's wind back and say we're now talking to two 25-year-olds who might be listening to us. They've only been working for maybe, if they've gone to uni, maybe only 3 or 4 years. I don't know that you can say to them just embrace each day and go with it without any kind of direction at all. I mean, I'm just really interested in this as a discussion point, because what would you say to someone who's only had 3 years experience out there in the workforce or outside of you know, in adulthood, say?
It's interesting because a lot of my market, or my audience, I should say, are 25-year-olds. And if I was talking to a 35-year-old, they'd want to know everything. 25-year-olds are just like, we get, you guys don't know what you're doing. Yeah. I think they're the first generation, or the millennials are definitely the first generation that know that adults don't know what's going on.
Yeah,
and
that's
they haven't
true.
got it
That's
sussed.
true, because
So,
we've taken away that veil. I mean, my parents were brought up, you know, children are seen and not heard.
Yes.
I think our generation, our parents kind of loosened the reins a little bit and said, okay, I'll listen to your point of view, but I'm still the parent.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, this generation, we're going, I don't know that much anyway. I'm not going to tell you what, I mean, I'm not saying this is all people, but I don't really think I'm in a position to tell you what to do. I'm just going to guide you along the way if you need help.
Yeah, it's like we'll be in sort of parent-child therapy together. It's, you know, we'll get a 2-for-1 deal. But I think because of that, there's a much bigger focus on purpose and experience. And, you know, particularly now where it's like, so you're going to have to pay off this $200 billion debt and no one's ever going to afford a house. And it's kind of like, well, what am I going to do in my life that actually has meaning and purpose? Whereas I think the Gen Y, and again, generalizing across demographics is a little bit like horoscopes, you know.
It is.
But for the purpose of that, there's a much bigger sort of aspiration to have the material and the concrete, and that it's fixed and permanent. And I think, again, COVID has smacked us in the face with a very big lesson about what is actually important, and that it's kind of our health and who we are and who we connect with. And that connection is so vital. So I think if I was talking to a 25-year-old, we'd be having, and the 25-year-olds I talk to are wild. Their minds are wild. They're so entrepreneurial, and they see the world as somewhere they can explore everywhere. They've got probably a high level of anxiety, but a much higher level of passion and belief and purpose. And I don't know, like, I don't think there's value in, I can't say what I would have done had I not had this experience that I've had.
No, of course not.
But I certainly feel like the revelations around that came recently to me. And it's been really recent and embedded absolutely by having spent the last 10 weeks at home versus traveling constantly and bounding around, being my, you know, curiosity fueled self. That
time
really
to kind of go inwards
my
a bit.
exterior has now started.
Time to kind of go inwards a bit.
Yeah, and I think, you know, I do a lot of meditation. I talk a lot about my spiritual practice and my yogic practice. And in fact, only yesterday I was writing an article for a newspaper, and I suddenly realized that I'd actually just harmonized the stillness I get inside with the frenetic energy that I have outside. And it was like, oh, that's what that's about. So that was interesting, and it's sort of constant. But I've been on that constant experiential path in parallel for a long time. There was a point at which the quest for understanding self and spirituality became really super important for me, which was probably again in my late 20s, early 30s. But it was a part I was quite ashamed of, because in my family, spirituality was just seen as rubbish and you were a fool, and science and fact was the only thing that really mattered. And so it's taken me ages to come out and to sort of really, again, embed that in my brand and embed it in who I am, which is why I've sort of done this rebrand around just being quite blatant and out front that my work is to work with people for self-transformation. And that's it. It doesn't matter what flavor you put on it, whether it's digital doctoring or whether it's, you know, therapy with someone or coaching, whatever it is. My job is just to stand there and witness their transformation. And it's the most powerful thing there.
And you do that with leaders and people who aren't leaders? I mean, are you doing that with people who are really at the top of their game and people starting out? Or is there, do you try and get to the people who are slightly younger in order to facilitate that? When you say your job is just to be there and help people with transformation, who are you helping?
We're really helping everyone. So in Dare to Lead, we do all kinds of different rooms. We certainly work with very, very senior executives and CEOs in that C-suite who are as in dire need of transformation as anyone else, because their materiality and their success often is way out in front of their personal development and their time for themselves. And they don't know who they are. They just know who it is to be a CEO. And when they start doing self-exploratory work, it's kind of mind-blowing.
I bet
and
it
I
is.
personally love working with emerging leaders. And I mean, my philosophy is we lead from every role in our life. We don't just lead from the top. So we're leading in families, we're leading in community, we're leading in us, sitting in a car and not honking at someone. We're leading. But I love working with people who haven't ever had anyone say to them, you're a leader now. It's like, this isn't age related, it's attitude related, and it's essence related.
Yeah. And of course, the fact that we've all been put into isolation has put a whole lot of those leaders who do run on a rabbit hamster wheel with thousands and thousands of staff, and I'm so busy and I travel everywhere and I do meetings all the time and oh my God, sorry, you're going to stay put and you're actually going to spend time with your family who you probably hardly ever see. You're going to not be able to do anything other than Zoom calls. And I mean, my dearest hope, and you hear about it all the time with people now, is that we are going to come out of this with some fundamental changes to how people think and how, especially those people that are trying to running the country and running big organizations, will hopefully have had some kind of an epiphany and gone, maybe there's different ways we could be doing this, and we could be a lot more gentle with people about the juggling their work and their home life and their work and how important it is, and realizing that if work goes, there's still a whole other life you can have, and I think that's been really interesting, which is going to perfectly bring me along to my segue of, which I think I know what you're going to say, but I do ask this of the women that I'm interviewing, which is, how do you juggle your work and your life? I'm guessing they're pretty closely intertwined for you.
Yeah, I'm pretty integrated, and certainly for the last little while, I don't value work. I don't see work as separate to my life, for a start. And I've violently opposed the idea of a work-life balance, because it's like saying I'm going to have a parent work balance or a sporting club work balance. Like, we're not separate people. We're all the same.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
This is where like the flow of it is. I mean, and I've worked remotely for probably 10 years.
Yeah, same.
My husband works remotely. We both work in startup kind of world. So We've always worked from home. We've always worked anywhere we can plug in a laptop, in the last few years. So we've been this is just business as usual for us. The fact that we aren't leaving the house is just, we're still doing
It's just a bit of a bonus, actually. But I have to say, Dave and I are exactly the same. Because we work online, it was kind of like, right, so all of a sudden we're not weird. And the other beautiful thing about this is that the rest of the world is now joining us, like they're kind of going, oh, well, if I've got to work at home, maybe this actually is quite cool, and you can get to know people on video, and, you don't have to leave the house for meetings.
I've had to spend a lot of time fighting down my sense of deep, deep, putrid smugness, because I've been banging on about remote work for a decade. I've been talking to anyone who'd listen, and I constantly would talk to bosses and they'd be like, oh no, we've got to see people. How do we know they'll be working? And I'd be like, because they'll be producing stuff like an output, which is what they're meant to be doing now, right? Because I'm pretty sure the output for people isn't sitting at a desk for 8 hours. And the lack of trust, it would astound me. And it's like, you don't have a remote working problem. You've got a fundamental management problem if you don't trust your people to be doing what you ask them to do. So suddenly when all these big companies are like, oh, actually, this is pretty good, and we just saved 18% on our costs of running a company.
Overhead.
It's like, this is the best. So I'm feeling pretty much smug. So Jules, I guess the answer to the question, because we go off on the tangents, us. But
I know, but that's the whole point of this conversation.
I really think that the important thing is that we feel ourselves and we feel integrated. And I think the integration piece is really important. If I feel like I'm only working and I'm not napping and I'm not baking bread and I'm not hanging out with John and I'm not playing with the dog, like, that's when I'm out of balance. And now sometimes I might have to deliver something, and so I will spend a frantic 3 or 4 days, but I'll balance that by breathing and stopping. And being really grateful for that work. And but I've worked in jobs where I've worked nonstop and I've always felt like, oh, I've got to do more, And it's so deeply unsustainable and it's so damaging to your health. So for me, it's like in this time, it's just the time. And that's what I'm also hoping, that people have really seen how much you can get done when you're not wasting time sitting at your desk, such that you can take the dog for a walk in the middle of the day and you can have half an hour to meditate and you can still do all your work and you can still get dinner on the table and it's a yummy dinner, and you can still hang out with your kids or whoever. Like, we're really tricked into this world of work that being present and showing up and being the last to leave and the first to get there, that's not life or productivity or even desirable. It's just a recipe for numbing the pain with food, alcohol, drugs, gambling, sex, whatever else, because we're not present to our life doesn't give us what we need.
Yeah, and for many years I worked at agencies and I remember them having that, and many employees would remember it. And I mean, I haven't worked really for anyone else for 20 years now, but I still remember my boss coming out, and I was an account director with a couple of staff below me, and at 6 o'clock and saying, where are the other two? And I said, well, I sent them home at 5:30 because we'd done work. And she said, I don't feel like this business is working properly unless people stay till at least 6 p.m. And I remember thinking, well, that's your bloody problem. That's not ours. You don't need to have that. So it's really crazy. Okay, so now I've got a fun question for you, which I think you will enjoy, although I'm kind of throwing it at you without any warning. So let's see, here we go. Can you give me 2 useful apps that you think are great? Because we started talking about apps on She's the Boss in our lunches and things, and we have so much fun with, oh my God, I love this one. And I know you're the queen of this. So I guess the hardest thing for you is to just name 2. But can you give me a couple of apps that you think are really useful for business, and then one fun one? Like, my fun one is Candy Crush, I'm ashamed to say. But my boys go, it is impossible that you're still playing that goddamn game, Mum. And I'm like, I'm up to level 4,000 and something now. But anyway, so what are your 2 useful apps and then a fun app?
So interestingly, I'm not the queen of apps because I don't keep anything on my phone that I don't use. And there's very few apps that have come along that I actually am like, I use this every single day. So the app I use every single day without fail, and I'm going to categorize it as business and as pleasure, is Insight Timer, meditation timing app. Because without my meditation, like, that is my absolute non-negotiable. Wherever I am in the world, no matter what physical state I'm in, I will meditate every single day. And I use Insight Timer to record that and to chime the little chimes at the right time. And so that's my number 1 app of all time for everything, because it's just so totally precious. And as soon as I adopted it, I've never unadopted it. It's always been on the front page of my phone and will stay there forever.
Oh, that's fantastic. I love that.
It's such a beautiful thing. And for anyone who's like, oh God, I can't meditate, my mind's too busy, all of that stuff, it's another podcast story entirely, Jules, but this is a really good place to start with, just getting a practice, even if it's only a minute or so a day. So the other app, which is probably my second go-to app, which I use constantly, and all of them sound like they're more leisure than work, but I see them as work tools, is Audible, because I drive a lot when I'm whizzing around, and I travel a lot when we have planes in the sky. And so I tend to not do a lot of fiction stuff. I don't watch a lot of fiction. I don't watch a lot of movies. I read a lot of books, and I read a lot of non-fiction because I figure I can just continue to educate as I go. So I've always got a stack of stuff on Audible and on my Kindle. And if I buy a Kindle, I buy the audio. So I can either be driving and listening, or I can be on a plane and be reading. And so it's total utility for me. So I have a rule that I made in my own head around that. What do I want to put in my head? What's my mental hygiene? And it's just, if you're not meditating or sleeping or just doing something that's going to evolve you. So I evolved myself that way. So I'm bundling Kindle and Audible together because it's really, really super useful. And the other app that I just absolutely adore, and
that's the Whisper Sync thing,
day
isn't it?
It came out, and
sorry, that's the Whisper Sync, so that you can move seamlessly between audio and reading depending on where you are.
Yeah, and devices, because I might be on my iPad one day and then my phone the next, and I love it when it goes, do you remember what page you're up to? It's like, nah, tell me. So that's that. And then the thing that I love so much and have just adopted and never ever let go of is Spotify. And I really remember, because I used to buy a lot of music and I'd always be buying a new thing on iTunes, and it's so great that everything's just there. And, you know, I've had a subscription to Spotify since the get-go, and I love it. I've got all these different playlists. I share them with people. I make playlists to go with my newsletters. I'm like, drop of the hat, here's a playlist. And it's just, the connection through music is super important to me. So that's just, yeah, I love it. So Insight Timer for my meditation, Audible and Kindle for my edumacation, and Spotify for my dance-macation.
Oh my God, you are so cool. I would think you were a 25-year-old. The last time I asked someone,
What are you saying, Jules? Oh, I do use a lot of banking apps, clearly, but they're not fun. Yeah. They're just tools.
Take it as a positive. But I know, there you go. Isn't it interesting how some people think of them some way? And of course, I love music, but I hardly know Spotify at all. I am useless with it. I download movies to iTunes, and I don't even really create playlists. I just go in and play an album like an old-fashioned person.
Oh, Jules.
I know. Well, you know, I've got to show my chinks in the armour somewhere. All right, now we're just about to wind this up, but I'm going to put you on the spot because I should have told you this earlier. But for any women that might be listening, are there any tips that you would like to offer about if you're going to run your own business, have you got something that you would like to suggest?
The most important thing I can say to all of you, and I say it looking you in the eye from my heart, is just begin.
Yes.
You can't know what's right. You can't know anything more than the basic market research you're going to do. Everything you'll learn from talking to your customers and really, truly understanding what it is to be in service to another human. And you choose who you're in service to. So you want to open a fashion boutique. Who are you in service to? How are you changing and transforming their lives with beautiful clothes, or with witnessing them coming in to try them on? How do you change their lives with a coffee? How do you change their lives with a bunch of flowers, whatever it is, on an app, whatever you do it in service to others, and you won't work a day in your life, because you will always feel that you're getting a return and you are really deeply fulfilled. But don't wait. The thing I see with women all the time is this hesitation. I'm not enough. I don't know enough. I don't have enough. Who's going to believe in me? Why would I be the one they'd buy from? And it's such deep bullshit, and we must back ourselves more, and we must back each other. And when we see women starting, we need to get behind them like big cheer squads and go, 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 because we have to really take each other together and launch ourselves together. It's so, so important. You know, we can transform the world as women in business, and we just have to believe in ourselves.
Oh my God, that absolutely is the most beautiful thing to say. And that's exactly why I set up the She's the Boss podcast. All the rest of it, it's about women empowering the women around them, help other women so that we can lift all of us up. That is the perfect ending to what has been...
And that's why I love you, Jules, because you've...
Thank you, Polly. Well, this has just
You've always done that.
This has been the best interview. You are fabulous. I know that people are really going to enjoy it. If anyone wants to get hold of you, what's the best way for them to get hold of you?
Head to my website, pollymcgee.com, and there's a contact form there. I'm on Insta as @PollyMcGee, LinkedIn @PollyMcGee. Just follow the rabbit hole of my name and you'll find me.
Well,
and I can't wait to meet you.
Yeah, well, that was just brilliant. Thank you so, so much. And I hope everybody enjoys it.
Thanks so much, Jules. You are the total boss.
I hope you've enjoyed this She's the Boss chat episode. It was great to have you here. If you want to stay in touch, you might also like some of the other things that we've got going on with She's the Boss. Firstly, I've got the She's the Boss show, which is on Ticketing.